Says it's preparing a live stream. I think we're live. I'm live stream. I'm Tobias Carlisle.
Oh
This is
boy.
the Aquarius Podcast. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host Jake Taylor. JT, what's news?
Welcome to the show, Toby.
Sorry for that intro, folks.
Yeah. We've set the bar at a new low for technical.
JT and I are both still very jet lagged, and I'm back on the road again.
Yeah. Yeah. We were, as getting everyone caught up, we were in Asia for the last 2 weeks. And so took a little break. Now we're back to do a debrief. And while we were gone, you guys decided to break the market on us. Much appreciated.
Yeah, so we were in Tokyo for a week, and then Shanghai for a week. And interesting contrast, I think, between the two cities and the two investment styles in the two cities. And I think there's sort of I think it's kind of an interesting the way the energy of the cities matches the investment style a little bit.
Oh, like insane how they do that. It's it's quite interesting to see how that manifests. One thing I was wanted to start out with was that I on like the first observation I really like came away with was that you can't get a sense of a foreign land, I think, without visiting it yourself. Like I think I was a little naive about that before. And you know, you could talk to lots of people and read the news but I think it's really not the same as kind of seeing it close up for yourself. And I think especially I don't think that I knew or that a lot of us in the US know what's really kind of happening in China unless you kind of see it for yourself, especially.
When you say that, we are talking about China, right? Because I think was Japan
Well,
was Japan unexpected?
I think the part of Japan that was unexpected was that you knew it was going to be difficult to get management to do the capital allocation things you wanted to do to unlock some of those frozen and, some might say bloated balance sheets. Uh, I I think it's going to be even harder than I thought it was going to be before seeing it up close.
So you've invested in Japan variously over the years. There was a net basket from 2015,
11, Fukushima.
2011.
Yeah.
So Japan, everybody knows Japan's been in a bear market since 1993, earlier 1990,
I mean,
87,
peaked in 89, right? I think.
89.
So I think they just took that out, what, last year or something from 89.
So they've been in this very long bear market. There have been a number of rallies along the way, and there have been a number of these periods where it got very cheap. And
Yeah.
2011, it was possible to buy a big basket of Japanese nets, which is lots of balance sheet value, cash, and so on, trading at a big discount to the
Yeah.
liquid portion of the balance sheet at a two-thirds discount. How did that basket work out?
It worked out well. There was like any typical net expectation where a few were clunkers, most kind of did nothing, and then a few really worked out well enough to kind of carry the balance.
The
And
VC approach to,
well, it is. It's a power law kind of driven outcome, even though you're starting off with kind of equalated, uh, relatively junky. Although honestly, the companies were low ROA, low ROE companies, but they were all profitable. There was an R there, so it wasn't like it could definitely be worse. I feel like a lot of times over the years trying to buy nets in the US and they would just be not only they'd just be hemorrhaging cash too. So you were
yeah,
like racing the clock, it felt like to see
yeah.
if there was going to be an unlock.
So we flew into Japan first. A very large portion of the Japanese stock market trades at a discount to book value. Like for book value, everybody gets upset because yeah, it doesn't represent what you can take out. It's what's been put in and so on. But it does represent what has been invested in the company. And it's a problem for these companies that they're trading at a big discount to book value.
Yeah.
And the reason is that those returns on equity, returns on assets remain very depressed. Like they're trying to get them up to like 5%. That's sort of the goal. I mean, talk to one of the managers, they were like new projects looking at a 5% return on equity, return on investment. So we visited with buyout firms, multiple buyout firms,
Hmm.
multiple activists,
Yeah.
long only shops, the
The
Tokyo
Tokyo
Stock
Stock
Exchange,
Exchange, which was interesting, quite interesting.
and because we wanted to hear from the horse's mouth, there's this directive, regulation, suggestion from
Yeah.
the Tokyo Stock Exchange that companies have to get their price to book value above one, or they face delisting.
I
Not clear what they face.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a full like it's hinted at that that's the potential, but I think it's more like, well, we're going to send you a strongly worded letter first, or maybe 10 times before anything really happens. Not exactly clear what the teeth are there, but they're working hard there and they're pretty thoughtful about it. Like they know that things take time and they're doing what they can to nudge in the right direction. So I think they're on the kind of on the side of angels there.
So we met with the Tokyo Stock Exchange, two guys from the Tokyo Stock Exchange. Um, I've had lots of meetings with regulators over my life in Australia and the US.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately, I've never had a meeting like that though,
Yeah, they were surprisingly candid, weren't they? I thought they were
and helpful.
forthright and helpful. Yeah.
And so they have this plan to move all of these Japanese companies that are under earning into a higher category. They've categorized them in terms of corporate governance and willingness to sort of embrace more shareholder friendly practices.
Yeah.
And they've targeted these ones that have not responded at all. What they sort of the group three or the third tier of this
Yeah.
response to this directive. And they're trying to chase these guys. And they do seem to be on the side of shareholders in Tokyo, which was refreshing, interesting, new.
Yeah. And my hunch is that given the culture of wanting to kind of you don't really want to stand out on your own as much. Like iconoclastic thinking, it doesn't seem to be their strong suit. And so my hunch is that it'll kind of be like that joke about bankruptcy, but it'll be like, how did you get rich in Japan buying cheap stocks? Well, slowly and then all at once. Which is to say that the companies may, once the sea change starts to happen, like there's a momentum and it might be kind of nonlinear. And
Yeah,
I don't know if you can time it very easily. Like I think it'll be one of those things
yeah.
where it's like not working at all, and you're like, okay, I'm ready to throw in the towel, and then all of a sudden, all of them will kind of phase change and pick up their sell their cross shareholdings, maybe to distribute cash, maybe buybacks. Lots of different levers to pull there, but it's all like very simple stuff that's required, right? Like you don't have to have a good sense of what's the ROI going to be on like, AI cloud spend to get it right and maybe get paid. Like all they have to do is just figure out some real basic corporate, capital allocation stuff. So simple, but so far proven to be not easy.
Well, we met with the first groups that we met with were the buyout funds, and it sounds all of you young guys who are doing looking for HVAC businesses to search fund
Roll up.
into
Yeah.
and buy out, you need to get yourselves to Japan because there are real
Mm.
businesses that are trading at ridiculously cheap prices. And the buyout firms are talking about taking stuff private at 5 to 6 times. I think when we said 5 to 6 times to one of the other firms, they pushed back on it a little bit. This one of the not one of the activist firms. This was one of the it could have been one of the activists, and they said not 5 to 6 times. They said more like 8 to 9 times, which that's still in the US context, that's still pretty cheap. I think the US is currently like, I
13
think it
maybe.
could be,
Yeah.
yeah, 12 to 15, like on average, that kind of range, something like that, which is pushing the upper edges of, uh,
Allowing for a decent return.
yeah, yeah. There's been this giant buyout in um, Tokyo, led by KKR,
KKR. Yeah.
and they've paid 33 times.
Yep.
So that's at the very big end. The big end is just as competitive globally as it's always been. So Tokyo is no cheaper than New York in terms of the very biggest companies because the big buyout firms from the US are over there chasing these companies. There's just not many of them around. You've got to put in a very, very solid bid to
Yep.
get these things. And clearly 33 times, that's expensive. But at the lower end, all of these little, not little, but these buyout firms, middle market, lower market buyout firms, they say they pay 5 to 6 times. They're borrowing at T-Bor, which is the Tokyo Interbank overnight rate, and it's like 0.25%, 25 basis points plus two or 300 basis points, so another 2 or 3%. So they say they're borrowing at 2.5 to 3.5%, and they're able to borrow 70% LTV. That's loan to value. So they're putting in 70 to 80% LTV. So they're putting in 20% equity at 5 to 6 times EBITDA, borrowing at 2.5 to 3.5%. And if you plug that into a very simple little spreadsheet, that you get some pretty decent returns without
Yeah.
having to do anything really. That's old 1980s buyouts in the States. That's what the level that they were done at. You're going to get good returns at that level.
I remember you said at one point, if you were 20 years younger,
Yeah.
you might move to Tokyo
I mean, I
and
was
get
planning
after
on
it.
doing it anyway. I was thinking about doing it anyway.
Yeah.
I think there's a very big opportunity in Japan. Like it's kind of it's very, very obvious. It's sitting right there. The challenge is how you move from, well, some of the listed companies, um, we're going to talk about this a little bit more. That there is a real challenge with these listed companies. So, but more than just what these buyout firms can pay, they also have investments from GPIF, which is the big government pension fund. They have these brokers who contact them and give them these exclusive deals to buy these things. They've got, and the banks do the same thing, and they've got backing from the banks. They've got equity from the banks. They've got lots of lenders. So it seems like the the quantity that is short in Japan is the buyout firms themselves. We met with a few, but like even those guys, they didn't feel to me to be as experienced perhaps as one of the ones that I regularly run into in the States. Is that fair?
Mm. Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I don't want to.
Sophisticated, maybe,
Yeah, I was gonna say
without
that
being too rude
without
about it.
saying it. Yeah.
Just a little bit less aggressive, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, the PE market now in the US has gotten so cutthroat that like you have to be kind of aggressive to get a deal done. And they're kind of picking through a big, and like you said, like there's these M&A brokers that advisory services that go and find the businesses, and they'll go find the funding from the banks, and they'll show up and package it and deliver it to the PE firm, and you like I think you just sign and start collecting checks. I don't know. I don't know how it works, but
Um, so after the buyout firm, we went to see a long only firm.
yeah, a few kind of activist. Some of them a little bit more probably
I'm
suggestivist.
splitting the activist guys into their own kind of bucket. I'm just going to do the long
Okay.
only without activism. I don't know if we should mention them. It was nice to meet this guy. He's well known. He's been around for a long time, and get some of his perspectives on what was happening. I think he was able to find enough stuff where it was pretty well managed
Yeah.
and where the balance sheet was pretty tidy. So he was doing quite well without
Buying
having an
buying
activist.
a little bit more quality too, I think. A little less like that idea that it's quite a bit easier to get the horse to go where you want it to go if it's already riding in that direction. So,
And they seem to be doing pretty well. And then we visited with two activists. Well, I visited with two activists. JT wasn't there for the second one, but the first one was an interesting perspective on what we had already been seeing, that They thought that this sort of approach of naming and shaming, which I think was the Tokyo Stock Exchange's sort of tool to get
Hmm.
them to get these companies to comply, they felt that that wouldn't be as effective.
Hmm.
It might be a little bit what you'd expect an activist firm to say, but
Yeah.
they felt that there needed to be a little bit more pressure applied for anything to happen.
Yeah. But then meeting with an actual company kind of was a little bit of a wet blanket, like cold water in the face, just as to what you're up against if you were to try to do that. And I mean, they're perfectly nice. It's not like that's not the issue. It's when you talk to them and try to bring up some of the like ways that they may unlock shareholder value, it just doesn't feel like it's really registering very much. I don't know. How'd you feel about that? I mean, of
Well,
course, there's the language barrier that we were trying to jump over there.
without naming the company and without sort of giving the exact proportions that these things were going on, but this is a very common problem. So there are um, cross shareholdings where company A owns a shareholding in company B.
Which could be
Company,
typically like a supplier.
yeah, a customer or a supplier. The
Yeah,
customer owns shares in the supplier. The supplier owns shares in the customer. And it has the effect that management is entrenched. There's no external pressure that's able to be applied by activists or takeover firms or buyout firms or anything like that. So they just trade.
or just thoughtful owners of the business.
Right. And so say that's about a third of their assets. And they have another third in assets in cash. And they justify that by saying that they sort of feel like it's an obligation to hold cash because it's not safe to not have enough cash. Um, from the perspective of their customer or their supplier, they feel like they're obliged to kind of hold that cash
Yeah, it's a
that they're
shock
in
absorber.
business. Yeah, which I like that. I'm not opposed. I don't know about the scale, and without having dug through the financial statements, you would have no idea whether that was an appropriate level of cash or not. But the sentiment is right. I just don't know if it's real or if it's the sufficient justification for having that much cash.
Yeah.
And then just on the numbers that I'm sort of making up there, it's like a third cross shareholdings, a third cash, and then it's trading at like three times. So it's an EV EBITDA of one, or it's like EV net profit of one. And then the the concern with Japan was always that it was shrinking or it wasn't growing. But I think it's pretty clear that they've had inflation of 5% over the last 12 months. And I think that inflation in that sort of order looks like it's here to stay for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, starting to show up in wage growth as well, which once that can get kind of sticky, and now psychologically it gets harder to have deflation.
They're very, very unwilling to raise prices. That's a big deal to raise prices.
Yeah.
So we saw some ads where they've never raised their prices. That's one of the things. That's the way they advertise their services, which is a little bit like the Costco hot dog. Like it's not been raised. It's
Yeah.
not going over $1.50.
And don't even think about it. We'll effing kill you.
I mean, at some point,
Yeah.
I guess it's a loss leader. I guess you can do that. But not if it's your whole business. You can't be selling, you can't ever
Can't
not raise prices in your business.
it can't be all hot dogs.
But then these things are like growing 5 or 6% a year, trading at one times. That's a pretty good setup. You're going to make money at that level. Even
Yeah.
passively, you're going to make money at that level.
And even just imagine if you effectively liquidated your cross shareholdings and bought back your own equipment for half of book value, half of what you spent on it. I mean, hugely accretive, right? I mean, you can't really lose then.
You just take over the supply. You vertically integrate. You take each other over at a big discount.
Well,
With
that might actually be more of what how this gets solved. Actually, I was thinking about like M&A might be the actual answer. Like you can't depend on them to kind of find the right answer themselves necessarily. It might have to be like we're taking the controls away from you. Sorry, like we're just going to buy this company and take it over and then, fold it into whatever.
shareholder laws are quite friendly in Japan. at sort of 1%, you can call emergency general meetings, you can request lists of shareholders. At 5%, there's something equivalent to like a 13D filing where
Yeah.
you have to describe what you're proposing to do to the
Intentions
company.
known.
And then there's another threshold at 20% where the company is effectively put into play. And so you need to be, I think, to actually or to sort of compel something to happen, you need to be at 20%. And that's not easy on some registers. They're just not going to be able to get there because they're too locked up by GPIF and the cross shareholdings. And so there's going to have to be a different solution for some of those businesses.
Yeah.
But one thing that we talked about that I thought was kind of interesting was that the Japanese companies really are high quality.
Mm.
They have this real focus on a high-end product. It's going to be well made. The
Yeah.
factories, everything's well maintained. They've got this, you know, very long-term perspective. And maybe it's one of the criticisms of the US is that the perspective isn't long-term enough. It's a little bit more throwaway.
Yeah.
Japan, they make this very high quality product. They're going to do it well. They look after it. It feels like they have many of the qualities that we would like more American companies to have.
Yeah. Yeah. That like kind of capital Q quality, Zen and the art of motorcycle maintenance guys that, get excited about that stuff. You'd think Japan would be like a hotbed for that, just given the Kaizen,
Yeah.
continuous improvement. It's all the same stuff, but yet for whatever reason that maybe it just doesn't grow fast enough to get them excited. I wonder about that sometimes, but there's a difference between growth and quality.
One thing we didn't talk about was just Japan. It was Tokyo itself.
Yeah.
The one thing that really Tokyo is incredibly clean. It's incredibly quiet. The people are very polite.
Yeah. No jaywalking at all, even
No
at like
jaywalking.
5 in the morning and there's not a car to be found and people are just standing there waiting for it to turn.
I did do a little bit of jaywalking.
Oh,
I couldn't hold it in. It came out.
arrest this man.
I had to. But I think that that same attitude applies in the business as well. They're all really well maintained. All the taxi drivers got little white gloves on.
Yeah, isn't that
My
nice?
taxi driver saw me walk around a corner in the wrong direction. He jumped out and he called me back and he like directed me to my hotel. And then he waited until I got in the elevator and waved for me to. It was really nice. It was really sweet.
Can I tell you a little story of a place that I went to? Because I went to Kyoto for the
Yeah,
weekend when you went to Shanghai. I brought
yeah, I
brought the
haven't had
wife
this.
along. Uh, so I visited this temple, and I'm gonna mispronounce it, obviously, but it's Kayomizu, Kiyomizu, Kayomizu Dera Temple in Kyoto. And it was built in 778 AD, which is now it's over 1200 years old. And it's constructed entirely without nails. It's all joinery and like, master level patience required to make all this wood fit together. And it actually intentionally uses impermanent materials, wood naturally ages and it's so deftly assembled that it can withstand all the like being in a very seismic area for all these 1200 years, and it's because the joinery is so good, and it has the flex in it, and this kind of like preservation and maintenance and kind of thoughtfully rebuilding things over generations to me feels very very Japanese. And there's this other place, this it's called the Grand Shrine of Ise, I think it is, ISE, and it gets rebuilt every 20 years for the last 1300 years. And so the next rebuild's scheduled for 2033. And the purpose is this like continual renewal, and it's not permanence. So there's like this. I feel like corporate Japan has a lot of this kind of same mentality to it, very long term thinking. But anyway, a little bit of that's as close as we're probably going to get to veggies for this week. It's kind of all layered throughout.
Well, I had a nice meeting. You were in Kyoto. I had a nice meeting where one of the managers, who's my favorite manager, and I'm going to talk to him. I hope he'll come on the show. I don't know. He's got a good strategy. You might want to not want to tell anybody about it.
Yeah, smart.
Um, he was disappointed that Jake wasn't there because he had some veggies for Jake, and I don't want to butcher them, but he made the analogy that the lack of predators in the Japanese financial system had sort of led to a change in the ecosystem there a little bit. And in the same way that they reintroduced wolves to Yellowstone,
Mm,
and that had an impact on the ecosystem of Yellowstone, and it brought back some rivers and some greenery that hadn't existed previous or hadn't been there since they'd taken the wolves out, because the wolves ate down the deer or whatever the ruminant animal, prey animal is in there, which then in turn ate all of the grass and
yeah.
changed the course of the rivers. And so in the same way in Japan, the absence of predators in Japan had sort of led to a suboptimal ecosystem, and reintroduction of wolves to Japan might um, bring that ecosystem back to life a little bit.
Yeah, that's great. I think you know, scavengers get a bad rap because they're kind of tend to be ugly and they eat gross looking things to us, but they serve a really important purpose, right? And maybe not enough scavengers kind of
Scavengers,
cleaning up
predators.
the, well, yeah, both, I guess, but now we have dire wolves after 10,000 years. We brought them back. And so now we'll let a
What could
bunch of those
possibly go
guys,
wrong?
yeah, let them
If
run wild.
Jurassic Park teaches us anything, it's really easy to keep those things in cages. There's
Yeah.
no chance of them getting out. You
Although
don't have to worry
apparently
about them.
I read someone else was saying that it was they'd only like changed like 13 different DNA positionings or something within the normal wolf to get to the dire wolf, and it was like basically like it's kind of BS. Like it wasn't really that big of a breakthrough.
Sounds pretty hard to me. I don't know.
I don't know.
If you know the right 13 to change.
I guess. Yeah.
Like we share a lot of DNA with the banana. It's not share a lot of DNA with lots of animals. You just change a few little bits and pieces, you come up with a different animal.
Yeah, that's true.
Um, Let me give some shout outs,
Oh,
and then we're gonna do Shanghai. Um, Petah Tikva, Israel. What's up, Pants? Cleveland, Brandon, Mississippi, Tampa, Bendigo. Good start, Hamish. Early stuff here. Waterloo. What's up? William, the Wizard of Waterloo. Scottsdale, Arizona. Bethesda. Max in Valparaiso. What's up? Jerusalem, Palestine. Samson, good for you. Nokia. Highland Park, Mendocino. Kennesaw. Jackson Hole. Jupiter, Florida. Oops, I skipped a whole lot. Uh, Austin's in Mongolia. How are you? Lausanne, Switzerland, Santo Domingo, Bellevue, San Diego, Surbiton, Bremerton, Albion, Gothenburg, and I'm in Carmel on spring break with my kids. Gothenburg, Sweden. Did I say
beautiful.
that? Tallahassee, San Diego, McDonald Island, Toronto, Wodonga, Dubai. Cool.
So
So we went
China, the
straight from Tokyo to Shanghai. Oh, well, sorry, we went
contrast,
from Japan to Shanghai.
yeah, the contrast
Wow.
was immediate, wasn't it? I mean,
Shocking.
I like the I took a taxi from in Kyoto, and the driver's wearing the white gloves, and he's like apologizing that the traffic is bad and like couldn't have been nicer, like you said, was helping. And then I get to Shanghai, and you know, it's like a total culture shock. I had to argue with the cab driver because he was like the little toll machine like quit halfway through the drive, and so when we get there, he's like trying to stiff me, and I was like, oh God, and here we go. And China just has this frenetic energy to it that I wasn't expecting. Like, there's just a lot going on there.
Well, Shanghai, they say Shanghai is China's New York,
Yeah,
and super high energy. Um, People are much, much louder. The traffic is insane. The traffic is like these little scooters that come up on the path. You can be hit walking along the sidewalk. You can be hit in the middle of the road, whether you're on the crosswalk, if the light's on.
yeah,
It's
head on a
wild.
swivel.
Head on a swivel in Shanghai all the time. The number of times that I nearly got run over. Actually, after a while, and this is from coming from Tokyo, where we're not allowed to jaywalk.
Yeah.
It got to the point where, like, basically, you're as safe in the middle of the street as you are on the sidewalk. So
Yeah,
after a
exactly.
while, you just gotta you get used to it, and it's
Yeah.
fine.
We were told several times by different people that the long term in China is considered 18 months. So
Yeah.
if a concept, a business hasn't scaled by 18 months, basically it's like time to just shut it down and like start over, start something else.
Yeah,
And
boil it down.
I looked up
Super down.
later in 2023, 24 million new businesses registered in China. It's
So
like
I
it's
read it.
launch fast, test quickly, pivot rapidly. But it's like the competition is crazy intense too. Like as soon as something is successful, there's like scores of these copycats who come drive the profits to zero. Um, and like the way that like as quick as businesses can grow, like when we'd hear some of the numbers, it would be like it honestly was like boggled my mind. But I guess if 1.4 billion people who are searching for an ever improving lifestyle, like I think maybe it's capable of that kind of growth. How'd you feel about that?
Yeah, so we visited, in contrast to Japan, where we were kind of like at the buyout activist end, Shanghai was venture capital, growthy managers, and in the VC it was hard tech,
Yeah,
which those are the VCs doing the real heavy lifting. That's hard tech is AI,
autonomous
autonomous driving,
vehicles
and
and
robotics.
yeah,
And
robotics for
robotics for them is like
manufacturing.
what, what's that? It's like the robots that are like Optimus. Actually, Optimus. So Tesla fans, you're gonna love this. Optimus is they all think that Optimus is the most advanced robot
Humanoid
humanoid
form
robot.
factor, right?
And I think they also think that Tesla's ahead in autonomous driving.
Yeah.
And I asked one of them because there's a chart that does the rounds every now and again that shows that Waymo is way out in front and Tesla is way behind in terms of autonomous driving. But none of the VCs in Shanghai agreed with that. They all thought that it was Tesla by virtue of their most recent rewrite of their code, combined with uh, their cameras and the millions and millions of miles that they've driven on the roads, they're ahead in terms of autonomous self-driving.
Yeah, best data, I guess.
And the robotics one was kind of interesting because what they're saying is that we're going to have these humanoid robots in 3 to 5 years, and that seems to me to be. It seemed to me to be.
A
I'm
little.
very skeptical of that. I think that's a real stretch, but we heard it so many times from so many different people that it makes me wonder if there is possibly something to it.
And this means like, doing the laundry, folding
Yeah,
clothes, like
yeah,
loading the dishwasher, I guess, like that kind of stuff.
yeah. Well, I
Rosie the robot, basically from Jetsons.
I said to after I said this to the last VC who was we sort of started with the hardest tech, and then the firm that had the best reputation for really doing hard tech, the real hard tech guys, and then we kind of went increasingly further, where they were a little bit broader, where they were doing other things as well. And so it's a shame that I asked this to the last guy. But I said, have there been has any of this been commercialized? Are there any commercial? Because I would have thought, like, if you've got a humanoid robot, that you're going to put that in a mine, right? Or you're going to put that
Yeah.
deep sea diving. You're going to stick it in some place that's very dangerous, or very boring, or both. And there's no commercialization of any of this stuff. So we're a long way, I think, from commercial robotics.
Did you at any point in China feel like there could be a moat in anything that would last more than 45 minutes?
Well, I felt like there are so many firms chasing all of this stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
impossible. If it works, then there's going to be. So there are 100 EV companies in China. Clearly, there are. I don't think we saw 100 different cars on the road, but there are lots of different cars on the road. And there are cars that there's a car that's reminiscent of Tesla, looks exactly like a Tesla. And there's a car that's reminiscent of the Porsche Panamera.
Yeah. Those are pretty nice looking, huh?
They were
Yeah.
like 30 grand.
That so we should talk about our Huawei
Yeah,
trip then while we're
yeah,
getting into this. Like I think we both came away feeling like they've China has passed the US on some
yeah,
things. There was
yeah,
a phone that was like it looked like a kind of an iPad that could fold up like 4 or 5 times on itself. And like I haven't seen anything like that in the US.
We walked
Uh,
into it. We walked it. We had dinner in a restaurant in a mall, and then we walked around the mall, and we walked into a Huawei store in the mall. It's not like we were in the Huawei flagship or anything like that.
no,
We were
no, this
just in
is
a
just
random Huawei store in a random mall in Shanghai.
yeah.
In that, they have giant TVs on the wall.
Oh my God, that TV was 110 inches and it was the most clear picture I've ever seen in my life. I couldn't look away from it. It was insane.
And somehow they use AI to take a less clear picture and make it into a more clear picture. And they showed they had these blurry videos, blurry pictures of models, and then they'd add in. And so it was like putting your face up against a mirror. It was that the detail was just incredible.
It was insane. And then how about the cars in the Huawei store?
And so this is I think the most shocking thing. We went in and the cars there are they're beautiful cars. They've got heaps of screens on the inside, leather seats. They're like luxury SUVs, luxury family cars, and they retail for about $30,000 US.
Yeah. And they look better than
Yeah,
$100,000 cars here,
yeah.
honestly. Like I feel like pretty safely saying that.
And they charge in 5 minutes.
Yeah. What what are we doing here?
They've figured out how to get these cars charged in 5 minutes. You plug them in and it charges.
Yeah. What do you think about the kind of this concept of 996 that we kept hearing about?
Well, I think the Chinese are real capitalists, and they're very, very ambitious, and they have this plan. Not so much China, they're ambitious for China, but they're personally ambitious as well. And to get what they want, they're going to have to work 996, which is 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week. And so that's the way they work.
And it's like a badge of honor. Like they all wear it proudly. Like everyone is just expects like that's what you're gonna work. Like that you want to like make your life better, you got a 996.
And if someone calls you at 1 a.m. in the morning, you answer the call and you welcome the call. You don't want to wait until tomorrow to hear whatever they're going to say.
It's true. Now, but one thing I did find interesting, and this goes back to the contrast between Japan and China, and this 1,200-year-old shrine. We toured a property developer in China, and one of the few to survive this current real estate correction, which has been quite the winnowing process. But we toured one of their building sites, and the houses are nice looking. They're expensive. They're not much different like than some kind of luxury in price per square foot in the US, I felt like. Uh, but there's kind of like this brittle feeling of I just want to say kind of cheapness to the build quality. Even though it looks nice, it kind of hints at this impermanence and like it needed to attract a high-end clientele who wanted to live there, but like I wouldn't expect it to still be there in 10 years. And maybe it won't be. Like maybe that's just the expectation that they'll need the land for something else. I don't know. But you sort of see this and like they'll identify, zone, get the permits, construct, and sell a huge complex in like less than 2 years. And here, I don't even think you'd get the permits available in 2 years for the size of this kind of project. Like they're moving so much faster. It kind of boggles the mind, to be honest with you.
Well, we walked along the river. Uh,
The Bund.
is that the one it was? The
Yeah,
Bund?
yeah,
And our host said this was a cement factory 3 months ago. And it was a mall with a whole lot of restaurants,
yeah.
waterfront,
Beautifully done.
art galleries. Yeah, looked magnificent. Really impressive. You pay for everything. So I think MasterCard and Visa are probably gone, I think, because they you pay with I used WeChat, you can pay Alipay, you can use Alipay. Every vendor has a cell phone, and if they don't have a cell phone, they've got a sticker, and you just scan the sticker with your app, and your app asks you if you want to make this payment. You click yes, you put in a little code, and you've made
Uh,
a payment and it doesn't run through MasterCard or Visa's rails. It just charges your WeChat account. And they say that they charge basis points for it, and in some instances they charge nothing because they just want access to the
data.
vendors
Yeah.
and the data. Yeah, so MasterCard and Visa are in trouble if why isn't somebody doing that here?
Uh, I don't know.
Facebook could do that here.
Because it just kind of works right now
Big
and it's
network.
low enough. But one thing I got the sense that the DeepSeek was a pretty big moment for China based on all the conversations. Like, because obviously you talk about AI a lot, especially if you're visiting VCs. But I think what it showed was that they weren't as far behind as they kind of worried that they were on AI, and um, and really like the capex that the U.S. has been doing might, who knows, but if you're able to get like close to like 80% of the result with 20% of the cost or less,
Well, the
then
numbers that they were quoting were 95% of
yeah,
the
well, okay.
quality with 5% of the cost,
Yeah,
which is bananas. I don't know if it's that either, but that's the DeepSeek analogy, right? That it's like 95% of OpenAI's 4.0 version, like their best version. And it's on the chart that sort of measures how smart these things are, how many questions it can answer. It's right sitting just underneath it
yeah,
for like minimal cost.
yeah.
And we think it's, I don't know if anybody could definitively say if that was real or if they had some they had some advantage provided to them by the government or they had spent more money than they had said that they had spent.
Yeah.
But everybody seemed to think it was possible because they were totally transparent with their model and their training data in the background
Yeah, and the weightings.
and the weightings. And so it's possible. And one of the VCs who we talked to said that he interpreted this guy as being like an engineering type personality who just wanted to see this stuff out in the world because he was making his money in a different
Hedge
he's making
fund.
his money in a hedge fund. Yeah.
Yeah. One thing I did thought was interesting, um, um, that a lot of the venture guys, I would have thought that there'd be something a little bit further out, like
Yeah.
vision, right?
You
Did you
talk,
feel that same way?
yeah, 100%. So the hard VC is like um hard VC is like they call it deep tech. Like it's the stuff that's like the cutting edge, the bleeding edge of tech. And these guys try and put money into these really moonshotty type ideas. But then when you come to hear what the moonshot type ideas are, they're just kind of what perhaps you'd expect them to be, just being a regular old
Yeah. Not even
deep-diving
like a
investor in the
tech guy,
States.
right?
And it's they're working on AI, they're working on autonomous driving, and they're working on robotics.
Yeah.
And so they're not working on cold fusion,
Yeah. I
not
guess some
working on
climate
quantum
tech too,
computing.
but I don't even
I
quite know
don't
what
think,
that
yeah, we
means.
didn't really
Batteries.
see,
Yeah.
didn't really see what that meant.
Another thing that I noticed that I hadn't really read anywhere else is that it sounded like Chinese companies don't want to use cloud-based AI solutions. Like they want it on premises, like for
Yeah.
data protection reasons. And I don't, the US to me, I feel like people are more comfortable, businesses are more comfortable with like, okay, whatever, Microsoft's got all our data. Um,
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that's, I just don't know. I know that my wife's firm has its own internal AI because they don't want to share their data.
yeah,
And they're a big consulting firm. So it's possible that I just don't know. I haven't heard otherwise. But DeepSeek is totally downloadable so they all use DeepSeek, the downloaded version, tuned up for their own stuff. I think one interesting thing that we should mention about the next iteration of these models, so the DeepSeek model and the OpenAI model, whatever the next one is going to be called, they're the two. So DeepSeek is just underneath OpenAI's version at a fraction of the cost. And so the next thing is to see, does DeepSeek leap OpenAI with its next update? or does OpenAI leap ahead again? Well, they're still ahead, but do they go further ahead? And the other question is, where are we on the S curve of adoption of or the tech?
Not adoption, but like
Yeah.
the pace of innovation and like the quality of the models and the output. And if we've already kind of used all the good quality data and now like they're already using synthetic data, which to me sounds like you're going to end up with some kind of like diminishing returns on that, right? If you're just sort of making shit up to feed into it.
So
It's a little bit breathing your own exhaust, isn't it?
I asked, I don't know what synthetic data is, so I asked somebody what synthetic tech is. Synthetic tech is if you ask it to solve a difficult math problem and it can't kind of figure it out, then you have somebody solve it and it shows the tech how to solve it, shows the
Hmm.
AI how to solve it. But we're at the point where all human knowledge has been fed into this AI and it's still not smart.
Oh,
It's pretty smart, but it's not, it's not AGI. We
it
fed in
didn't,
all
yeah, it
human
hasn't.
knowledge and it's not AGI.
You would think that if you had every single book in your brain, that you would beat any human on at everything, right?
Yeah.
But it's still pretty magical. Like the idea of taking words and turning them into numbers and then being able to perform uh, mathematical derivations and expressions of things and then turning that back into words from the math and it actually makes sense and like provides something useful is that's a pretty big miracle to me actually. I think that's quite incredible.
It is impressive. It does feel to me like it's a little bit, I think that it takes the average of, which I think is what it is mid. It does take the midpoint of like a whole
Total
lot
mid.
of, and I think the output is a little bit mid. Like that's kind of the feeling that I have at the moment. And that's pretty impressive, I would say, for where we are. And if we continue along this path for maybe a few more years or decades, maybe it's writing it, maybe it's Shakespeare. I don't know. It's not Shakespeare just yet. So one of the things that I
It was the
after
best of time. It was the worst of
worst of
times.
after I think we got a little bit of a shock in Shanghai because one of the we visited with another manager who's a very famous manager in a Chinese context, um,
Yeah.
um, who has uh, got some 100-bagger positions, long-term record compounding of like 44%. Does these deep dives in the companies, stays with ordinary Chinese folks to learn about learn about their
Daily
consumption preferences.
habits. Yeah.
Um, so I,
And it's a she, which probably went against all of your guys' preconceived notions.
yeah, and I, I came back and I wanted to investigate a little bit more because I, I got a little bit of a shock at how advanced I think the cars were, the charging, and I've I found a website called Inside China Business, and this guy talks about business in China from the inside, and I think that his impressions match my own. So I think, and he's spent 15
So he
years.
must be right.
Well, I just mean like I think that the bits that I can verify of what he's saying are true,
Hmm.
and so there's bits that he's saying that I don't know that I'm learning about. Um, so I don't know, but I think I think what he's saying is the truth, and he talked about a few things. He talked about this lady had mentioned that they can't, it's hard for them to invest overseas in manufacturing type businesses because they've got such great manufacturing in the Pearl Delta and and another region that she mentioned, which I just is escaping my mind, but they have this density of factories,
Yeah.
and these factories are so advanced that really China is the premier manufacturer in the world. And it's not that they're the low cost manufacturer. I think they're the very best manufacturers in the world at the moment. They can turn out a lot of product. And so this inside China business guy, he talks about the dark factories that China has where there might be 10 engineers and the factory itself is infinitely configurable, and it might on one day produce like a demountable dwelling unit that looks uh, like a some sort of space age car, and then they can retool the next day and punch out some Japanese autos like over a couple of days later. And the factory does this autonomously. They just
Really?
change some settings with like a dozen engineers, and the factories can punch these things out. So I don't think the US has anything like that. There's a guy in the US running a business called Hadrian, and that's in Los Angeles. It's in Torrance. I've driven around the location. I watched some YouTube videos about them. They're trying to do some very advanced manufacturing, like something similar, but um, they're a long way behind what it sounds like these guys are doing. So yeah, I think it's concerning for the US that manufacturing base has sort of disappeared a little bit.
Hmm.
I think you know, it's probably important for the US to get that back in some way. I don't know how you do it. I don't know if it's possible or not, but I was a little bit scared, shocked when I saw the products that they're punching out. And one of the things that this guy says, and he's talking about US and German and Japanese auto OEMs buying these Chinese cars and tearing them down into parts,
Hmm.
into the component parts, and then looking at,
Reverse engineering.
yeah. And what they're saying is,
Wait, I thought the narrative was that all the IP is outside of China and they just
yeah,
steal it. Is that not true anymore?
I don't think so, because these guys tore it down and they said these cars are better and they're cheaper. And they were shocked because they said you can have better but not cheaper, and you can have cheaper but not better. But
Yeah.
somehow these guys have got better and cheaper together, which was my impression too when we looked in those cars.
Yeah.
They've got some technology that we don't have,
I th
including the charging.
I think in general, one of my main takeaways from the whole trip, and especially China, but um, the view that we get from the US and the US media just really doesn't do very good justice. And the reciprocal of that is that talking to the Chinese people there and their views of the US are also pretty distorted. Like they thought that we were on the verge of civil war here, that like all kinds of if you only read the news and all the negative things, the sensationalism on both sides, you end up with kind of this funhouse mirror version of what it looks like. And I think that's pretty toxic. And I'm not sure how to fix it other than to just travel and see for yourself. But I think at both places, both sides of the Pacific, there's this like universal human desire to, which it transcends geopolitics completely. It's just people, they're striving for progress. They want a sense of agency in their lives. They want to like feed their families. They want to do work that they think matters to them. Like it's it's the same. It's this human impulse, and I think we lose sight of that with the headlines a lot.
Yeah, yeah. I think you're right. I think that some of the views that the Chinese have of the US are equally wrong. Um, in their mind, they've sort of already eclipsed the US. But I think that may be true, in fact. But they think that America's doing a lot of dumb stuff. They call Trump the nation builder, but for China.
Yeah.
I got the impression that um, they're not at all worried about the tariffs because they don't feel like that's going to impact them at all. If anything, that's a benefit for them because they um, they already do a lot of business with the rest of the world. What was their justification for the benefit? Now that I'm saying that, I can't think what it was.
Um, I think it's a combination of internal consumption and rest of the world that wants to buy Chinese products and are happy to have better things that cost less. I mean, that's just people like that.
What about what about the oh, I've just gone blank on it. Sorry, I just read a line. Um, yeah, forget it.
Huh.
Uh, I did have one more thing I wanted to mention, but it's just slipped my mind. Yeah, I think my impression was that they're very ambitious, which is understandable. I the president said, the Chinese president said, I'm not I'm not giving money to lazy men.
Oh yeah. And people seem to like that, huh?
Yeah. The Chinese like what they're doing. I got the impression they like the government. They like what's happening. They're ambitious. There's a lot of creative destruction in China.
Oh my God,
Businesses
constant.
pop up and get torn down really quickly. Like that's when they say the long run is 18 months. So somebody asked, is China investable? So this is kind of interesting. I still don't know the answer to that. I still have to think about that a little bit more. There's a huge opportunity there, clearly, in terms of the rate of growth and the technological prowess that they have now. Um, but then the managers on the ground say, if you pick the wrong manager, I mean, the investors on the ground say, if you pick the wrong manager, they will kill you in
Yeah.
the sense that they'll just blow the company up. And then some of these businesses where you think it's quite dominant. And one of our guys said, yeah, but it's like Macy's, JD.com now, it's like Macy's.
Yeah. He thought he was buying Amazon
Yeah.
when he bought JD, but it turned out he was buying Macy's. And these are only
Yeah.
like, you know, a year or two apart. Like that's how fast the change is. The consumer preferences seem to shift. Like when people are done with a concept, like they're totally done with it and they've moved on.
Well, one
Um,
thing I thought was interesting, the VC firms all said, we're doing AI, robotics, autonomous driving, and bubble tea.
yeah, exactly.
And I thought it was a joke, but I think it's real. Like there's this
No,
bubble
no, I
tea
think
company.
yeah, there was a bubble in bubble tea there, I think.
It's a funny, yeah. I thought that was funny, but
The
the
competitively advantaged periods and trying to map out what that would look like for any of these businesses seems incredibly difficult.
I think in some sense you probably need to be on the ground in China to do this. What do you think? Does a basket of well, we've got 3 minutes, so does a basket of Chinese stocks
Ooh,
get you there? Does that work? And what are you selecting for? Are you trying to go value? Or are you just trying to find your growthy value?
I have no idea. I mean, the concepts can scale in crazy ways. Like, I mean, I don't know the exact numbers, but like something like Luckin Coffee, for instance, especially on a franchise model where there's not capital kind of slowing you down. I mean, these guys built, I think, 10,000 stores in 1 year. I mean,
Yeah,
just
that's crazy.
incredible growth to some of these companies. But I don't, when it goes sideways, like you have all that fixed cost going you against you in the other direction. I mean, you could just see getting killed as well pretty easily. So it's quite difficult. I don't know how to like what's a better do you want like log jammed frozen balance sheets on in Japan with no real change, or do you want just blood red churning oceans of competition in China? Both
Well,
quite difficult.
the consumer surplus in China is huge,
True.
which is kind of interesting. Like, well, in Shanghai, we should say Shanghai because that's where we were, and we're staying in a very nice area in Shanghai too, which was pretty modestly priced. I thought like where we were staying was pretty cheap. For it was like a luxury hotel, but it was cheaper than a lot of places in the States.
Yeah.
The coffees were,
Half
I
price.
like coffee. I went around and I tried a lot of coffee.
Yeah.
Coffees were world class. Australians can go there and drink coffee. The coffees are good, and they're like $2 each.
Yeah. Instead of
Most
five or
instead of six.
six.
Yeah. Um, it's easy to order everywhere. There's a lot of English, and if there's not, then you can kind of like mime your way to the right answer. Or you can use these translation apps. They're not good enough, but they kind of get you some of the way there. That was interesting. We sat in one of the Japanese manager meetings, and we had a translator, but I also had my translation app on the phone. They're not there yet. AI translation has a long way to go.
Yeah.
But
It
I
would be
learned,
it would be funny because like the manager would be talking for like 5 minutes on something, and then we'd get like
no,
3 sentences given back to us from from the translator.
I did see that's an American idea a few times in
Oh
the
yeah.
translation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, does a basket of does a basket of Japanese stocks work? Basket of undervalued Japanese stocks. Do you think you need the catalysts?
I think if you're patient enough that that probably works. I don't know if the IRR is like off the charts necessarily. And I bet if you picked the right scaling concept in China and caught hold of you know, of a
Yeah,
rocket ship, you're
yeah.
you're golden.
China's
Uh,
cheap. China's undervalued. There's a lot of
it's cheap
PE
too, yeah.
4, 5, 6 times for like
Yeah.
30% ROE businesses.
And like 30% growth top line
Yeah,
too. Like
yeah.
it's kind of
But
insane,
then
right?
they might be shooting stars. They might
I
be,
know. Well,
could it be?
that's what like I thought about it as like the energy equivalent is like um China is shale oil drilling where it's like you pump all of the profits out in year one and then after that like it's just the depletion rates are like off the charts. And that might be
Yeah.
what it is. It's just a bunch of like shale drilling. I don't know. Or maybe
100%.
something coalesces and like around some brands that like get some kind of global scale and become the Procters and Gambles of the world or, Coca-Colas of the world. Maybe
Yeah.
there's something that they do eventually that does find that. I don't quite difficult though to find one of those early.
We've got a very interesting decade or so coming up here for China and Japan and the US, hopefully.
Yes, may you live in interesting
We're going to live
times
in interesting
indeed.
times. Um, but that's time. Thanks, folks. We'll be back next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. I'll be back at the desk.
Are we gonna
JT
have a
will be back
guest
in the
back so
kitchen.
we don't have to talk so much?
Thanks, amigos.
All right.
We'll see